onyambozi. Ngibuyile emhlabeni wakho baba ukuzohola isizwe sabathethwa.
Dingiswayo uyayiphanga.
Lesihlalo ngesakho ndodana.
Sabalobane!
Ngiyafisa ukuba ngibheke nawe nalensizwa. Ngumngane kumina.
Umuzame ngithi ukukhulu ukusithoba kunjalo nyambozi. Ntombazana, mushumpulu ekhanda.
Ngiyakhuleka kuwe nyambozi ngiyacela.
Nyambozi. Lalela. Ayoshabalala bonke abantu bakwaNdwandwe.
Hello everyone, welcome back to ASR, African Stories Realized. This is a full recap of Dingiswayo and the Mthethwa story on Shaka iLembe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. The diplomatic party returns with confirmation of an imminent war within Ndwandwe led by the bloodthirsty Zwide. The Zulu leaders gathered to discuss potential allies, but Mkabayi dismisses Senzo's attempts to align with Nandi's Elangeni kingdom. Instead, she sets her sights on forging an alliance with the powerful Mthethwa kingdom. We are introduced to the Mthethwa tribe through Prince Gogongwana, who is engaging in trade with the Portuguese for valuable resources. The encounter showcases the Mthethwa kingdom as the most advanced kingdom encountered thus far. Prince Gogongwana returns to his kingdom where we meet his father, King Jobe, a comical and charismatic figure. Mkabayi travels to the Mthethwa kingdom to plead for assistance in the upcoming war. However, King Jobe is petty and refuses to help the Zulus unless Princess Mkabayi reconsiders his marriage proposal. Prince Gogongwana recognizes the threat posed by Zwide and desires to support the Zulus, but he laments his lack of power, acknowledging that he can only assist if his father allows it. With the Zulu warriors about to be defeated by the Ndwandwe army, the Mthethwa warriors, led by Gogongwana, arrive and defeat the Ndwandwe, taking Zwide and his surviving men captive. Gogongwana arrives in Mthethwa with the captives, and his father demands that Ndwandwe pledge loyalty to the Mthethwa. Back in Ndwandwe, the queen argues with the council, refusing to pledge loyalty to Mthethwa, but still plotting to get Zwide back. Back at the Mthethwa kingdom, Zwide's mother, the queen, arrives to bargain for her son. She quickly realizes that the king is easily manipulated due to his visible dementia. His sons discuss the king's dwindling insanity, and Zwide's mother seizes the opportunity, bewitching and seducing the king's favorite son. When it was time for Zwide and the Ndwandwe to pledge their loyalty to the Mthethwa, the king instead released Zwide to his mom and lined up his own sons for execution after his favorite convinced him that his brothers were plotting against the senile king. The episode ends with the execution of Gogongwana's brothers. Gogongwana tries to flee but is struck with a spear to the back. With the help of his lover, the royal healer Baleka, Gogongwana flees and finds refuge in the kingdom where his sister was married off to. A manhunt ensues, led by Gogongwana's only remaining brother Mawewe. Eventually, they catch Gogongwana and his lover trying to flee again. Balega is executed and Gogongwana is pushed into a flooded river that streams down a waterfall. Balega, who was thought to be dead, is saved and nursed back to health by the missionaries who traded with Prince Gogongwana back in episode 2. Prince Gogongwana is also found unconscious at the bottom of the waterfall by hunters from the Thubi tribe. After he had been nursed back to health, he parted ways with the Thubi hunters, who advised him to seek refuge with King Bungan. Upon arriving at Thubi, he told the Sangoma king he wasn't a traitor and can be of use to him, presenting him with the lion he killed. It is here he was given his new name, Dingiswayo, the exiled one. During his exile, Dingiswayo crossed paths with the missionary lady he had traded with before, who reveals to him that Balega is still alive. Word would eventually arrive Mthethwa that the prince is still alive, and Mthethwa warriors would arrive at Thubi to apprehend him. Dingiswayo tried to flee but was cornered by one of the Mthethwa warriors, who comes close to killing him in a struggle, but is saved by one of the men traveling with the missionary lady. It's revealed that Dingiswayo and Ngomane have been captured by a group of slave traders working for the Portuguese. The slave traders took Dingiswayo and the rest of the people that had been captured to a camp while they waited for the slave ship that would take them to Europe. While in captivity, Dingiswayo and Ngomane hatched an escape plan, and on the day the ship arrived to take them, they rose up against their capturers, with most of them escaping. Once they were free, Ngomane tried to take Dingiswayo back to Mthethwa, but they were seemingly recaptured by the slave master. Dingiswayo and Ngomane being taken to Gwamabutu after their recapture, where King Makasana sentenced them to execution. However, Baleka would appear and plead for Dingiswayo's life, who in turn requested the king spare Ngomane as well, who had declared him a traitor but would soon realize the leadership qualities the future Mthethwa king possessed. Ngomane was released, but not before pledging his loyalty to Dingiswayo, who stayed behind to catch up with Baleka and learn from King Makasana, making it 2 kings he had studied under now. King Nyambose passes, but even in his last days, he still longed for his prodigal son, Gogongwana. But Mawewe moves in on the Mthethwa throne regardless. Word of King Nyambose's passing arrives in Maputo. King Makasana encourages Dingiswayo to march to Mthethwa and challenge his brother for the now vacant throne, even offering manpower in support, with the Subi expected to join him. As Mawewe prepares to take the Mthethwa throne, word arrives in the kingdom of Gogongwana's return, with Ngomane defecting with some of the Mthethwa soldiers as Mawewe rushes to coronate himself as king, Dingiswayo returning to his homeland backed by the Subi and Maputo warriors. On their march to Mthethwa, Dingiswayo reunited with Ngomane in preparation for war, but in a final attempt to avoid bloodshed of his own people, Dingiswayo paid Mawewe a visit, strongly urging him to surrender. Mawewe arrived in Kwabe, requesting warriors to aid him in his fight for the Mthethwa throne. Mawewe's request was granted, with Dingiswayo leading his army in battle against a largely Kwabe army led by Gogongwana. Dingiswayo's smaller army dominated, led by passion, until Shaka inspired his brethren in a moment of reckless bravery, resulting in Gogongwana's death. Having lost their general, Shaka and his brothers quickly retreated to Kwabe, where word had spread of their defeat. Shortly after, Dingiswayo arrived in Kwabe, demanding that they hand over Mawewe. However, he showed mercy and spared his brother's life, exiling him, but first cutting out his tongue, dooming him to a possible encounter with the European slave traders. The episode ends with Dingiswayo marching into Mthethwa, where he took up his mantle as King Dingiswayo Mthethwa. Battle lines are being drawn between the Ndwandwe and the Mthethwa, with Zwide seeking vengeance for his loss and capture at the hands of Gogongwana earlier in the season. Meanwhile, Dingiswayo had become vigilant of the growing Ndwandwe threat, revealing that Zwide's kingdom now controlled all the trade routes to the Portuguese, something which was previously under the Mthethwa's control. Dingiswayo's journey to claiming the Mthethwa throne took over a decade, and in that time, Zwide's kingdom and army had grown stronger. For this reason, Dingiswayo sought an alliance with the other Nguni tribes that would unite them in trade and militarily against the Ndwandwe. However, the other tribes refused to be united under the Mthethwa. This sparked a series of battles, with Dingiswayo using war to force the other tribes into pledging loyalty to the Mthethwa. Following Gogongwana's death, Nandi and Shaka moved to Mthethwa, where Dingiswayo welcomed them and drafted Shaka into the Mthethwa army under the Exile regiment. Shaka quickly showed his peers and Dingiswayo that he was a true warrior and born leader when he rounded up some of his comrades to confront a cattle thief in the forest. The cattle thief was an urban legend amongst the Mthethwa called Lembe, with many believing he could not be stopped until Shaka and his comrades returned with the king's cattle, which they were ultimately rewarded with. Shaka went on to become the leader of his regiment, training them and leading them in war. After a victory over the Ngwane, Dingiswayo set his sights on Elangeni in the hope that the king will pledge his loyalty to the Mthethwa without any blood being spilled. However, it's revealed that the ruler of Elangeni is now Mthethwa, Shaka's cousin and childhood nemesis, the same one he wounded before fleeing Elangeni as a young boy. Dingiswayo's message arrives in Elangeni, and word reaches Ndwandwe that Elangeni are the next target for the Mthethwa. The episode ends with Zwide, his goblin brother, and mother plotting to assist Elangeni in the impending conflict with the Mthethwa. Shortly after, a royal delegation from Elangeni, led by Mthethwa, arrived in Ndwandwe. Despite Queen Ntombazi's objections, Mthethwa and Zwide formed an alliance. The newly formed Ndwandwe and Elangeni army, led by Mthethwa and Bija, set off for battle. Word of Mthethwa and Zwide teaming up arrives in Mthethwa, where Shaka continues to be Dingiswayo's most trusted general and has set his sights on a young Mthethwa maiden named Vundlazi. Shaka would ultimately have his heart broken when the king's son Somveli stole the affections of Vundlazi. Shaka had no time to dwell on the disappointment and prepared his unit for the battle with his cousin, Mthethwa. He gave his beads to Nandi, then went off to fight for Dingiswayo and his mother's honor. Upon arriving at the battlefield, Shaka's army was greatly outnumbered, and he deployed the legendary short spear strategy, in which they charged at their enemy with their shields up in a turtle formation. Shaka's men boxed the enemy in and slaughtered them. By the time the battle was over, the ground was soaked in Ndwandwe and Elangeni blood, but death evaded Makadam, who had cowardly fled the battlefield. Klisha, the Ndwandwe general, also lived to tell the tale of their defeat, but the captured Elangeni men would not be so lucky. Despite Ngomani trying to stop him, a ruthless Shaka, having been bullied by many of them as a youngster, ordered that the captured Elangeni men be slaughtered, something which was against Mthethwa army protocol. Dingiswayo nonetheless ordered that Shaka and his men receive a hero's welcome. The episode ends with the celebration of the Mthethwa victory, with Shaka showering his mother with praise for raising him to be the man he is. Back in Mthethwa, Dingiswayo and Shaka have their sights set on the Zulu kingdom, inviting Ngogongwana and his people for a celebration where Shaka and his father came face to face for the first time since he was a small boy. Shaka demanded his father take him back to Gwanobamba and restore him as his heir, but Senza refused, deciding to round up his people and leave Mthethwa. On the Zulu's journey back home, Ngogongwana fell ill, with Mgabayi suggesting her brother may have been poisoned. Senza would not live long after falling ill, and as the Zulu kingdom prepared Skujana to take the throne, Mgabayi campaigned for Shaka to rule instead. Word arrives of Ngogongwana's death, and Shaka prepares to return to Gwanobamba. Little does he know that his uncle Umut has convinced Gujana that Shaka must die, so they invite him over in a planned ambush. However, Mgabayi was able to warn Shaka in advance, so Shaka and his men were ready for the ambush, killing Gujana and Umuti after he failed to pledge his loyalty. With Gujana dead, Shaka was left unchallenged for the Zulu throne. As Shaka makes his way back to Gwanobamba, he sends assassins to kill his brother, Bakauza, the grandson of Pungashe, king of the Buteles, who was taking a dip in the river with his comrades. Shaka's men arrived, killing one of Bakauza's bodyguards before taking the young prince's life in front of his men. Bakauza's body was returned to Buteles, where his heartbroken grandfather swore revenge against Shaka and the Zulus. Pungashe immediately confronted Dingiswayo about the Zulus' actions and urged him not to intervene in the war that was about to start between the Butelezi and the Zulu. However, Dingiswayo denied having any knowledge of the assassination and warned Pungashe against provoking Shaka. Dingiswayo's mother then confronted him for defending Shaka's actions and treating him like his own heir. However, Dingiswayo reminded her that his own son had abandoned the Mthethwa cause. Back at the Ndwandwe palace, Dingiswayo's son, Somveli, had overstayed his welcome. Despite telling the Ndwandwe everything he knew about his father, Zwide's mother ordered him to return to the Mthethwa palace as a spy and get close to his father. She then got one of the Ndwandwe warriors to help him get his story straight and be more convincing for when he returns to Mthethwa. Dingiswayo's son, Somveli, returned to Mthethwa, where his father immediately questioned where he had been. Somveli claimed he had been wandering the land just as Dingiswayo did after he was exiled, even producing a souvenir from Tonga traders he claimed to have encountered on his trip. Dingiswayo welcomed Somveli back, but revealed to his mother that he didn't believe his son and insisted that he wasn't a leader. Somveli's return was overshadowed by the arrival of Faku and the Mpondo tribe. The Mpondo revealed to Dingiswayo that the British had been fighting against the Xhosa tribes, revealing that the British had no interest in trading and instead wanted the land and all its resources so they could control the trade route. In Mthethwa, where the Ndwandwe had sent one of their men, disguised as a Tonga trader, to find out what information Somveli had gathered since returning home. Somveli revealed a shipment of maize and ivory that the Mthethwa were expecting at Delagoa Bay. In Ndwandwe, Zwide was plotting as he prepared a delegation that would travel to Gwanobamba for Shaka's coronation. His daughter, Ntombazana, was ordered to join the delegation, with the Queen Mother telling her to make sure she stands out so that she can catch the eye of the Mthethwa king, Dingiswayo. Zwide also instructed his men to hijack the Mthethwa shipment of maize and ivory in Delagoa Bay. Back at the Zulu capital, guests began arriving for the coronation, with reunions and introductions being made. Zwide's daughter sought out Dingiswayo and began flirting with the Mthethwa king. During the coronation, Zwide's men ambushed the Mthethwa delegation coming from Delagoa Bay, and despite Zwide's orders to avoid any casualties, his hard-headed son, Nomasanjana, attacked the Mthethwa men, which ended in the death of the Nduna, one of Dingiswayo's trusted headmen. In Kwanobamba, following Shaka's coronation, where word of the Ndwandwe ambush on the Mthethwa traders arrived, Dingiswayo immediately took it as an act of war and instructed Shaka to build up and consolidate his Zulu army in preparation for war against the Ndwandwe. In Ndwandwe, Zwide reprimanded Soshangane for challenging his son's authority in front of the Ndwandwe men, forcing him to apologize to Nomasanjana. However, Zwide also disciplined his son for going against his orders and putting them at the brink of a war they're not ready for. Zwide's goblin brother, who is also his oracle, warned him that Shaka's army had grown too strong and would crush them if they went to war now. Zwide decided to send one of his men, Melusi, who is married to Dingiswayo's sister, to Mthethwa in an effort to open up peace talks. Despite concerns over allowing Queen Ntombazi back in Mthethwa, Dingiswayo decided to hear them out. Zwide's mother and daughter, Ntombazana, arrived in Mthethwa with a proposal for the king. The Ndwandwe offered Ntombazana's hand in marriage in exchange for peace between the tribes. Dingiswayo considered the proposal, but only to buy time until him and Shaka were ready to crush the Ndwandwe. However, Zwide's mother and daughter had already devised their own plan for how they would bewitch him and lead him to his death. Dingiswayo suggested that Ntombazana marries his son, Somveli, but she insisted that she was only interested in the Mthethwa king, leaving Dingiswayo with a decision to make. Shaka then continued training his reinforced army in preparation for war. However, all battle plans were halted when a messenger from Mthethwa arrived with word from Dingiswayo to stand down. Nandi was not happy and insisted that it was disrespectful of Dingiswayo to pull out of a war he got them into at the 11th hour. A disappointed Shaka agreed that Dingiswayo had lost his appetite for war. Shaka and Dingiswayo joined forces against Mthethwa after he invaded the Khubi and refused to bend the knee to the Mthethwa king. Shaka led the Zulu and Mthethwa armies against Mthethwa's Ngwane army, with Dingiswayo, who had been observing from afar, joining in to fight alongside Shaka in some majestic fighting scenes. They applied pressure on Mthethwa's army, ultimately forcing him to retreat after Shaka claimed the lives of 2 of his royal guards while pursuing him. Following their victory, the Zulu and Mthethwa armies celebrated, with even Somveli receiving praise for his efforts on the battlefield. It was then revealed that the Kwabe king had passed away, with his son Unomo requesting support from Dingiswayo to challenge his brother Pakatwayo for the Kwabe throne. However, Dingiswayo refused to interfere in the royal matters of the Kwabe, promising Nomo that he would only support him if his brother declared war. Shaka did not agree. He confronted Dingiswayo about his marriage to the Ndwandwe princess and encouraged Dingiswayo to support Nomo's claim for the Kwabe throne, insisting that they had to get rid of Pakatwayo before he became a problem. However, Dingiswayo reiterated that he wouldn't interfere and urged Shaka not to interfere either. Despite the tension, the 2 leaders parted on amicable terms, with Dingiswayo thanking Shaka for his support. Dingiswayo and Somveli took a dip in the ocean, where Dingiswayo encouraged his son to find a wife because he will need to be married if he's to succeed him. However, Somveli's uncle had grown increasingly suspicious of his nephew after finding out from a Tsonga trader that the Mthethwa prince had never been seen in their lands like he claimed. Somveli's uncle ordered one of the Mthethwa men to find out if his nephew had ever visited the Ndwandwe capital. However, Somveli soon found out about his uncle's investigation and intercepted his messenger, slaughtering him before he could report back on Somveli's presence in the Ndwandwe capital. Meanwhile, Dingiswayo was aimlessly walking into a trap as he got closer to Ntombazana, accusing her of being a spy for her grandmother. However, the Mthethwa king couldn't resist the Ndwandwe princess as they consummated their marriage on the beach amongst the ocean waves. Later that evening, Zwide confronted Melusi for harboring the Mthethwa messenger who was sent to investigate if Somveli had ever been in Ndwandwe. Melusi, who is married to Dingiswayo's sister, denied having any knowledge of the messenger's investigation, but the episode ends with Zwide stabbing Melusi before his mother's hyenas arrived to finish him off. In Mthethwa, with an angry Dingiswayo determined to avenge the death of his brother-in-law, Melusi, who was killed by Zwide. He immediately ordered his army to prepare for war and sent word to Shaka for support. Dingiswayo's mother questioned Ntombazana and her handmaiden, but she refused to talk in the absence of the king. Dingiswayo and his mother agreed that Zwide had been playing them all along, before once again interrogating Ntombazana and her handmaiden. Ntombazana confessed to being sent to seduce the Mthethwa king and bewitch him. After a heated exchange, Dingiswayo spared the Ndwandwe princess and later invited her to his palace, where they slept together. After capturing Dingiswayo's seed for her grandmother's spell, Ntombazana and her handmaiden killed an Mthethwa god before making their escape. A messenger was given the Mthethwa king's seed and ordered to deliver it to Ntombazana. Back at Mthethwa, Dingiswayo's mother reported the escape to her son, making Dingiswayo even more determined to march on Ndwandwe. A guilty Somveli then decided to come clean to his father, confessing that he made a deal with Ndwandwe and has been spying on them, ultimately leading to the death of Buza, one of his father's trusted advisors. An angry Dingiswayo attacked his son before disowning him and banishing him from the kingdom. In Gwanobamba, Shaka received word that the Mthethwa were preparing to march on the Ndwandwe, with Dingiswayo requesting support of Shaka Zulu army, but Shaka insisted that it would take some time to gather his army. However, Dingiswayo was not patient enough to wait for support and insisted that they march on Ndwandwe as soon as possible without the Zulu army. Unbeknown to him, Queen Ntombazi's spell was already in effect, with the Mthethwa king already starting to hear things before disappearing from the camp. The Mthethwa army scrambled to look for their king, who was getting lured to the Ndwandwe capital by Queen Ntombazi's spell. Dingiswayo made his way to Gogongwana with the belief that his men were marching with him. But upon arriving in the Ndwandwe capital, it was revealed to be an illusion that was conjured up by Queen Ntombazi. The episode ends with the confused Dingiswayo finding himself trapped by Zwide in the Ndwandwe capital. Following the capture of Dingiswayo, who woke up in an Ndwandwe hut while his men desperately searched for him, Dingiswayo was then taken to the royal hut where Zwide confronted him, telling him to beg for his life, which Dingiswayo refused to do. Dingiswayo was then brought before the Ndwandwe court for a trial, where humiliation ensued. Zwide praised his daughter for helping capture Dingiswayo, followed by another confrontation with him, where he warned the Ndwandwe king of a storm that would come after his passing. The Mthethwa king was then tied down, while a herd of cattle was released before trampling over him. Queen Ntombazi then ordered Nomasanjane to deliver the final blow. He was handed an axe before beheading the Mthethwa king and presenting his head as a trophy to his grandmother, who later used it for her dark rituals. An Ndwandwe delegation was then sent to stall the Mthethwa warriors who were still looking for Dingiswayo, informing them that the Mthethwa king had been captured in Gogongwana and they should await terms for their surrender and his release. The delegation returned to Gogongwana and reported that Shaka had not arrived yet at the Mthethwa camp, presenting Zwide with an opportunity to take him out as well. He quickly ordered his men to ambush Shaka and his army, who were on their way to support the Mthethwa. King Donda of the Kumalo and Mzilikazi's father, Mashobane, began questioning the Ndwandwe's growing strength and sadistic ways. However, Mashobane's hands were tied because his son was still under Zwide's command. King Donda decided to take matters into his own hands, cutting off Shaka and his men before warning them of the Ndwandwe ambush that awaited them. He also reported to them that Dingiswayo had fallen. Shaka was overwhelmed with grief, but soon focused his efforts on salvaging the Mthethwa kingdom. He sent Ngomane and his men to support the Mthethwa soldiers who were led to believe their king was still alive in captivity. Shaka then led his men to the Mthethwa capital, where another Ndwandwe delegation was sent to deliver the news of their fallen king and demanded they surrender. The Mthethwa requested time to deliberate, with all the pressure on Somveli to succeed his father and pledge their allegiance to the Ndwandwe. And just as it seemed like they had no choice but to concede to the Ndwandwe, Shaka and his men arrived in the Mthethwa capital, and the episode ends with the Zulu warriors attacking the Ndwandwe invaders. Shaka tortured Zwide's best friend, Kwicha, before burning him and the rest of the Ndwandwe men alive. He then turned his attention to Nolujo, the Ndwandwe spy who had been working with Somveli. He left him alive to deliver a message to Zwide that he will burn Gogongwana and everyone in it. What followed was something out of a spy thriller, as word arrived that the Mthethwa men who had left for war with Dingiswayo were returning with Ngomane. Somveli, who had just been installed as the Mthethwa king, began to panic, warning Shaka not to trust his uncle Mondisa, claiming he was after the throne. An inquisition ensued, with Mondisa revealing everything he knew about Somveli's treacherous ways. Somveli tried to deny his part in his father's demise, but his servants supported Mondisa's claims, revealing that Dingiswayo had banished Somveli from Mthethwa before leaving for war. Somveli tried to justify his actions, but Shaka and Ngomane had no mercy, with his former Nduna, Ngomane, finishing Somveli off. His body would never be found, and the kingdom was spared of the news of his treachery. A heartbroken Shaka then took a moment to shed a tear by the ocean, apologizing to the Mthethwa ancestors for not being able to help Dingiswayo. Shaka then went on to offer his condolences to Dingiswayo's mother, promising to avenge her son. However, she questioned why Shaka was not there to support Dingiswayo in his last moments, demanding that no war be declared until the Mthethwa king's body was returned. Mondisa was installed as the Mthethwa regent and a mourning period was observed. However, Dingiswayo's mother refused to mourn her son until his body was returned. She and other Mthethwa women camped outside Gogongwana, requesting the return of Dingiswayo's body. The Zulu's biggest ally, the Mthethwa, with Mondisa questioning Shaka's support in Dingiswayo's last days, insisting that staying out of the war is best for the Mthethwa's survival. Then the aftermath of the Zulu victory over the Ndwandwe at Kogi Hill. The acting regent of the Mthethwa, Mondisa, quickly sent his congratulations to the Zulu and apologies for not supporting them against the Ndwandwe. Shaka accepted the apology, but soon started plotting to get rid of Mondisa, with the spy in Mthethwa later confirming that he couldn't be trusted. Shaka ordered his brothers, Dingane and Mthangane, to accompany Ngomane to Mthethwa and assassinate Mondisa. Shaka instructed them to gain Mondisa's trust by telling him that they were unhappy with his rule, and upon arriving in Oyengweni, Ngomane did not hold back, confronting the Mthethwa regent for not supporting them against the Ndwandwe. Dingane calmed Ngomane down and suggested that he excuse himself from the meeting. Ngomane and Dingiswayo's mother both agreed that Mondisa was not fit to lead the Mthethwa as a mutiny began to brew. Dingane continued with Shaka's plot to kill Mondisa, convincing the Mthethwa regent that he wasn't happy with Shaka's rule, requesting that Mondisa help him to get rid of Shaka and support his claim for the throne. However, Mondisa became suspicious when Shaka's brothers got their stories crossed, with Mthangana revealing that he also wanted Mondisa to support his claim for the Zulu throne. Further suspicion was raised when Mondisa discovered that a small group of Zulu warriors had been camping in secret near the Mthethwa capital. Mondisa confronted Shaka's brothers for plotting to take him out, revealing that he had captured the Zulu warriors who were camped near the capital, executing them in front of Dingane and Mthangana before ordering his men to kill the Zulu brothers. However, Ngomane arrived, demanding that the Mthethwa warriors stand down, with Mondisa's right-hand man, Mamba, joining the mutiny, ordering the Mthethwa warriors to put their weapons down before Dingane lunged at Mondisa with a dagger, assassinating the Mthethwa regent. Following Mondisa's death, Shaka arrived in Oyengweni and met with the Mthethwa elders to discuss a way forward, but he was not there to negotiate. Shaka demanded that they insert Mlandela on the Mthethwa throne and gave them two options: to either join the Zulu as an ally or become an enemy of the Zulu. Despite some initial resistance from one of them, the Mthethwa elders agreed to Shaka's terms, and Mlandela pledged the Mthethwa spears to Shaka's cause. Please give Tembinkosi Mthembu his flowers in the comment section. I've reviewed a lot of his work and he just continues to impress me. Ever since we lost Dingiswayo, I was looking forward to Shaka retrieving his belongings, which historically were buried because they never recovered his body. That's the side of the Dingiswayo memorial. Thank you to everyone for your support, feedback, and contribution to the channel. We'll be back next season with more reviews. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is ASR for the love of African filmmaking and storytelling.
Into engiyithande kakhulu ukusebenza kulolu hlelo leli i-character le kaDingiswayo. Yeah, i-journey yakhe ngicathi uhambo lakhe lona lungichaze kakhulu.
The winner, Dingiswayo Shaka iLembe. Umdali wezulu nomhlaba ngibonga umthembu omvela soqhudeni abangaseke emhlabeni nomculo omacingwane. Ngiyabonga ku-NFVF, ngibonge nakumasafta ama-committee, ngiyabonga kakhulu kwi-bomb shelter, ngibonge kuyi-cast and crew. Thank you to my mom, ngiyabonga kakhulu, and ngiyabonga nakunkosikazi wami ngokungisupport. Thank you, ngiyabonga.
Ngijabule kakhulu kule character le kaDingiswayo. Ngiyacabanga ukuthi bengiqala ukufika la ngafika khona ngabona ukuconnecta ne character nabantu ade bengisiza to get into character, sineke. Ngihappy ukuthi khona ngikuzuzile. Ngesikhathi engisifakile nothando engifakile nepassion to the character kaDingiswayo. So yeah, I'm grateful, ngiyabonga. Ngijabule kakhulu mfethu. Yeah. Not to say ngizothola isafter but ngisho bengisho Ndwandwe ngitshela eqaleni ukuthi le character le bengiyifila ngaphakathi ukuthi no. Benisho likhulu man because ngizokhulumela nje wonke ama actor. When we prep so much, we sometimes work under pressure. So to stand here, I'm a softer and NFVF is bong. When we celebrate, it means a lot. We did something for industry too and the people.
Vela sekudeni vela sovela enyandeni yomkhonto wamabaso. Bona wasekhaya mfowethu angeke udlalile. Udlalile uthe Nkosi Mthembu wenze hey ubona umuntu acte uzigcina usithi hayi